So good evening, everybody. My name is Stephen Gugu. I'm one of the principals at InVhestia Africa Limited, and I'm very happy to have you attend this webinar. So we're going to get started now. And what I'm going to do is just to, our agenda is simple. We'll make a quick introduction around InVhestia, and then after that, about the competition, and then we'll jump to the meat of the session, which is the webinar we are all looking forward to with Esther and Ndeti, the Executive Director of the East African Venture Capital and Private Equity Association. And then after that, we'll finish. So allow me to get started. I think this, if you look at your screen, you'll see there's a couple of rules that we've put there just around the etiquette. I won't go through them. I think everybody has had a look at them. But just key to note is that if you have any questions, feel free to post those questions in the chat and we'll get to them towards the end. So if you have any questions for Esther, you can post those there. Kindly keep your microphones on mute unless there's a request to have someone put their microphones on, but put them on mute for the time being. I will ask Esther to put on her camera once we get to the webinar, once we start the interview. So, but before that, let me just start with the quick introduction. So just a bit about InVhestia Africa Limited. The first thing to note is just what InVhestia does. And as InVhestia, we do the 4 items that you can see on your screen at the moment. We are project finance and corporate finance advisory firm. And apart from that, we also do some additional things. We're very much known around our financial modeling work. So we build financial models for clients. We train on financial modeling. You've probably gone to our online platform, learn.investia.com. If you haven't, please visit that platform and you'll be able to access. We have some good financial modeling courses. For the people who participate in the competition, we are giving access to one of the courses for free. So that they can be able to prepare themselves for the competition really well. We do a lot of advisory work. I'll speak about some of the clients that we have. We assist companies in capital raising, M&A. And then there's something that we've started doing of late, which is public sector financial modeling, where we work with governments and help them in terms of better decision making using financial models. Just to a quick look at some of the clients we've worked with. Those are some of the sectors we've worked with. Those are some of the brands we've interacted with. And I'm sure you'll see quite a number of brands there, all the way from the likes of Centum, private equity funds, different banks. And we're very proud of the work that we've been able to do. And we're always sort of like taking this experience and also adding it on to other clients that we work with at different points. And we're very happy also that some of these clients that you see here, some are our partners for this financial modeling competition. You can see there's Acon there. That's one of the key partners we're working with. They've already offered internship for the top student who's going to win the competition. At InVhestia, we also take some of the students, and also at EAVCA, and Esther will be speaking about that in a bit. With some of their members, they've accepted that they'll have a look at the list of the students who participate, the top students, and there's a possibility of then those students getting internships from these private equity funds. Continuing on that, maybe just to speak a bit about the competition. So why the competition? So at InVhestia, we're not only about the profit motive, we're also about having impact. We're about ensuring that the next crop of modelers, is born and is able to sort of like work across different sectors in different countries. And so we felt upon ourselves, just from the experience we've had when we recruit students to come and join our organization, we find that at times the Excel skills, the financial modeling skills are not as good as we would expect them to be. We also had this of some of the clients that we train, that they'd want better modelers to be trained for joining the organization. And so we took this upon ourselves and we said, you know what, we're going to reach out to different universities. We're going to then try to sensitize students around what financial modeling is about and why you need to have that as a repertoire of skills when you're joining the job market. It's such a critical skill. And so that's one aspect around that. Creating a pool of talent also is an important thing. And then, working with our partners. At the end of the day, someone has to take the lead, and our partners have been very supportive on this journey to ensure that we have more financial modelers that join the market and are able to scale different finance heights. Financial modeling is a core skill for any finance field you get into, and even more than finance. And I guess Esther will speak more about this, but you'll see much more of this coming up. That's our experience there with the competition. 4 years, 12 universities, over 2,000 students have been trained. This year around, we decided to go online. With the COVID, I think everything has been forced to go online. And I think it was a good thing because we were then able to reach out to more students who probably would not have been able to participate in the competition. Going on, some of the previous partners we've had for the competition, and we're very happy about these partners. You can see the East African Venture Capital Association that has been part of this, and our partners usually support in terms of, one, providing internships. Some of them provide from a financial perspective, and we are certainly very happy to have these partners on board. These are some of the partners we have for this year. As I mentioned, Aecon has agreed to give an internship. We have the FAST standard, which is the standard that we use for doing our financial models. We have F1, F9, this is a UK-based organization, and of course, the EAVCA. Okay, and these are some of the campuses we've gone to previously. I think we've mentioned that we've gone to over 12 campuses. And just to finalize on that, those are some photos. I don't know that you recognize your university there, or you recognize yourself from a previous competition, but very happy to have this competition running. And without much further ado, I'm going to invite Esther and to ask her to put on her video so that we can start with the interview or the webinar. Thank you, Esther. So let me get started already. So Esther is a good friend of mine, so I'm very happy to have you for this webinar. And perhaps you could just start by introducing yourself, telling us something about yourself, what you do on a day-to-day basis, and maybe also something personal, because I know that you do several other things apart from what you do on a day-to-day 8 to 5.
Hi everybody. Maybe I'll just introduce myself and not do everything that I do, because we only have about an hour to get through this webinar. So my name is Esther Ndeti, and I work for the East Africa Private Equity and Venture Capital Association. It's a mouthful, so we say EAVCA for short. I'm an executive director at the organization, and I have been for the past, it's going on 4 years now. And I love what I do. I get to work with people such as Stephen here, and those in the financial services sector on a day-to-day basis, just making sure that there's an environment where there's capital flowing in and out on a regular basis. I'm passionate about small businesses and ensuring that they have access to tools and that they're able to grow and sort of impact the economy as they are fit to be. So that's a huge passion of mine. Yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I'm a mother of one. I'm a mother of one, and yes, yeah. Let me summarize at that.
Okay, thank you, Esther. And one thing Esther didn't mention is that she's an avid cyclist. So she's one of those people who do those 150-kilometer rides. I do only 20 or 30 and I'm done. But anyway, Esther, just talking more about the EAVCA. Maybe you can just tell us more about its vision, its role in the financial services space.
Okay, so am I still? Yeah. So the EAVCA is the industry association for private capital providers across Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and Rwanda. So our mandate is about the 5 countries, the EA5. We were set up in 2013, where 7 private equity firms came together, and they realized they needed a body that was separate from them to be able to engage public and private sector and raise awareness of private equity as a whole. So some of these names. There was a Braj, the former Braj. There's an Actis. There's Fanisi, Centum. So Catalyst. Am I forgetting anyone? So there are 7 firms that came together. And if you think about 2013, PE firms had only been around for less than a decade, and they had a bit of challenge trying to just have people, or rather the wider audience understand what private equity was till today. You find you say private equity and they're like, what are you talking about, right? So this body was formed to inform both public sector, so regulators and policymakers, on what private equity is, what the potential for it was, and how to make sure that there are policies to attract more capital into East Africa. But also in the private sector, when you're looking at family-owned businesses and various businesses that have been running in East Africa, what is the value add of having a private equity investor into your business? That was critical to just be able to raise the knowledge and sort of like the capacity of practitioners across the region. So far we've grown to 99 members. So it's a member association, so we have 99 members as of date, and under them we have about 4.5 to $5 billion assets under management in the region. And they've invested in a range of sectors, everything from agriculture, education, consumables, you name it. So it's spread across the 5 countries in every sector you can think of. And what we do as an association is, first of all, the education bit I talked about, but also just the advancement and the promotion of East Africa as a private capital destination, ensuring there's an enabling environment constantly, as well as unlocking local capital to businesses here. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I should mention, so how we work is under 4 main pillars. So there's the advocacy bit, which I think I've talked over and over about. We work closely with the CMA, the Capital Markets Authority. We work with the Competition Authority of Kenya. Basically, any regulator who comes into face, who comes in touch with our members. So the CAK, the CMA, the Kenya Revenue Authority as well. So we do lots of education for them as well, just making sure that they understand what it is that the policies, how that affects businesses here in East Africa. We also work with the RBA, the Retirement Benefits Authority, because we are working hard every day to make sure that there's more capital that's going into private equity that's coming from local money. So we work with the RBA just to make sure that pension funds in the region are able to, commit more capital towards local PE funds. So that's under advocacy. And then we have 3 other pillars: intelligence, where we try to be the first point of information around PE and VC, do lots of research, studies, publications and surveys, and disseminate this information. One of the things we've chosen to do as an association is to send out the information to as many sectors and players as possible free of charge, because our role is to build the industry as opposed to make a profit from it. So we are one of the very few organizations that disseminates information without a charge to those receiving or consuming the information. The other 2 pillars are training. So much like Stephen, we also host, in fact, we partner with Stephen, rather with InVhestia, to host trainings to practitioners in private equity and venture capital in this region, where we're continuously upskilling and building the technical capacity of those who are working in the industry, as well as those who are looking to enter the industry. And then lastly, the pillar on networking, where try to make sure that we bring thought leaders and peers together into the same room or into the same Zoom call to share thoughts and to share best practices and challenges of working here, just to give them a platform to be able to grow and extend their impact across the region.
Oh, thank you. I mean, seems the EAVCA is really, would I say, has a serious impact in terms of how we do things. And maybe when you're discussing the impact, could you maybe mention maybe a few deals that maybe have been done? I know there's people who hear about private equity and they think it's this foreign concept, and they don't imagine that some of the simple brands they interact with on a day-to-day basis have actually been financed using private equity.
Yeah, so this is an interesting point you bring up, because on the side, when I'm not working, I try to raise awareness on private equity and venture capital in everything that I do. So I've given talks in high schools, for instance, and I mention private equity. I start with venture capital because you think that is more, it would resonate more with younger people, especially if you know about Facebook and the growth of Facebook and all of these things. But still, there's still a huge unawareness, rather, lack of awareness rather. So one of the things I always say is, have you had coffee at Java, for instance? Yeah, so you should know the story of Java. Java was a business that was built by this entrepreneur, and they put in their own private capital to expand. They brought in one of our investors who were one of the members, and to go to the next level, they brought in another private equity firm. The one private equity firm sold to the next private equity firm, and all those are members of EAVCA. And so, they used not only capital, so the value of private equity is not just capital, but also, there's always this other intrinsic value, with regards to strategic growth and operations and all of that, just to be able to become a global brand. So Java is a really good home story that we have. We have Quickmart, which is opening left, right, and center. If you've been keen on the streets of Nairobi, Quickmart. So Java has. Oh, sorry. Let me go back. So Java has, Emerging Capital Partners as one of their investors, and then they had, and previously to that, they had a Braj. Quickmart has Adenia Partners as the private equity investor in there. We talk about in the healthcare industry. Have you gone to Avenue Hospital, for instance? Also has private equity. As in everywhere you look, you'll find deals that have been executed by PE players in this market.
Thank you, Esther. And I mean, that's really good, because at times when people think about private equity, it always sounds like this big thing, and they don't realize that it plays such a huge role in your life, everything you do, even schools, right? I mean, the likes of Hillcrest, Kitengela International School, and so forth, all are private equity money that has sort of like invested into those. You mentioned something around disseminating information, and maybe just to take on that strand, I guess at the moment we've had COVID and its impact. And I'm sure you've probably spoken to some of your members to find out what's been the impact of COVID on the PE space. So what thoughts can you share? What have you learned? What lessons are your members picking out of these going forward?
That's that's a big question. It's a big question because, first of all, there was no playbook at the start of this. So as an association, what we've done is we've continuously talked to our members across the months, ever since March, when it was first declared as a pandemic. COVID was first declared as a pandemic, all through to date September, which is 6 months later, right? And the conversation has been evolving, from wait and see, too much uncertainty, to this is now how we're going to navigate, and short-term plays, mid-term plays, long-term plays. So to go back to your question, I think I'd address this maybe in two ways. One is, investors, look at the sectors that they're playing in, right? So a number of PE players in East Africa, many of them are agnostic. So that means a lot of portfolio companies, so their portfolios are risk diverse. So I think, the impact was there, but it was very specific to particular sectors. So if you look at, so for instance, healthcare, financial services, technology. Well, while there was uncertainty, there was a growing or increasing sign that there's resilience in these sectors. Then sectors that fall under the fast-moving consumer goods, where supply chains were disrupted, there's a lot of, hands in the air and running around. So I think one of the ways is to just really deep dive and look at sectors and how they're performing and the factors around them. And, companies and PE firms working together to figure out how to navigate and how to sort of like, be more efficient and work through that. But another way to look at the impact of COVID on private equity is to look at the investment life cycle. So fundraising to structures to, to deal generation to due diligence and valuations up to value addition and exits. So that entire spectrum of a fund, right? And then and then split that into two again. So those that had significant amount of deployed capital, so the fund had already deployed most of its capital, and those that had dry powder, the ones that had liquidity, the ones who had finished fundraising a year or so ago, a couple of months ago, and now are just about to, start looking for. So I think if you think about those two things in your head, then now now go deeper, you find that the impact varied from fund to fund. So those that had deployed capital, so you find that they had special focus on helping portfolio companies work through the big L word, liquidity issues, right? So you've deployed most of your capital. Businesses needed, if there's one thing we saw in the first 2-3 months, is businesses needed cash. Cash management was a huge thing. So, and then banks were also like being, so, PE funds had to work with companies to figure out the liquidity of these businesses, right? And how to, cost cut, cut out everything, cut the fat out basically. But also figure out where to get money on behalf of the company so the company can keep running its operations and still be productive during this period. So you see, actually, in that point, you can see the value of having a PE investor in your business, right? Because they're working hand in hand with you to raise that extra cash that you need as a business, right? Then, so of course, there's an increased demand for liquidity. And so PE funds were also, were busy trying to figure out where they can find debt to support their businesses. And then valuations, because you already deployed most of your cash. So valuations, losses, sorry. So the declining multiples, so valuation started going down. They said it's a buyer's market. So, if you're looking to sort of like exit your business, it's been a tricky market, having to hold on to businesses for a longer period and still fight all these issues in between and firefight in between. So, but the value of many businesses has gone down, which is a critical issue in our market, of portfolio companies rather. And then there's an interesting point around the increased demand for reporting from LPs. So just to roll back for those who might not understand that, but
I was about to say, I'm taking down all the technical terms you're throwing, which will ask you to define dry powder, LP, deployed capital, GP. But anyway, go ahead. I think you're doing a good job at explaining the terms as you're moving along.
Yeah, so private equity, much like businesses, private equity players also go and raise funds from other investors, institutional investors, family offices, DFIs, and that category of funders where they get money from, those are called LPs. So, and the fact is, which goes back to the point around mobilizing local capital, is the fact is in East Africa and Africa as a whole, private equity is underpinned by foreign capital. So most of the money in private equity comes from outside the continent. Most of it, like 90% of it. So, and you have to, so the point I was making, that there's been increased demand for reporting to these LPs. Already Africa has a perception of risk. Then I had Africa plus COVID, and if you remember the reports earlier, it's interesting. We've really been the ones who've come out of this ahead of most continents, but for a long, in between there's been a lot of perception around, companies are going to fall apart and all of that. So that increased risk just gave, the industry increased pressure to report back, send those models and those things back to the, to the LPs. So that's the category of funds who have deployed most of their capital. And then there are those who had liquidity, they had money, they had not deployed their capital, yeah. So for them, the fact that they're declining multiples, that presents a potential for acquisitions, right? That's opportunity for them. And if they're able to buy in now, that means that they get a higher return post-pandemic. But that's if they're able to buy, because also now there's a hold on the company until things get better, sort of like attitude happening. And just the fact that they have access to liquidity as well just gives them an uphand. But then don't forget there's the pressure of, you have a fund that has to have invested into XYZ businesses in the next 5 to 6 years and exited. So I think they're doing well, but also, it's hard to be able to distinguish and give proper valuations to businesses given the current scenarios. So some of the things we're seeing in terms of lessons is just being able to be dynamic and think out of the box when you're thinking about how to conduct due diligence, how to manage and conduct due diligence during this pandemic period. And then just also not only due diligence, but also valuations and just understanding the true impact of COVID-19 on, on the medium and long term of businesses. There has to be a shift in thinking in terms of forecasting and all of that when looking at businesses. And then businesses and PE firms have had to build efficiencies and cut costs, have cost synergies. One of the things we've seen is the need for strong management teams within businesses. So this has been tested across board, where we've seen PE firms having to have their teams, their people sitting inside those companies and working with them on a daily basis. So I know I've held a few webinars, and some of the managing partners, some of the partners would check into the webinar calls, and you could see that they're not in their fancy PE office. They're literally in the factory or in wherever place they are, because they're spending their days working with businesses to just make sure that they're efficient and just get them through this period, really. So yeah, resilience, cash management, preservation is just at the top of mind of most of the investors in this space.
I mean, thank you. And I guess for someone who's attending the webinar, you should realize that those lessons are also applicable personally, right? If one thing that COVID has taught us is we need to manage our cash better, we need to be resilient, both from an emotional or just as an individual, right? How you deal with crisis. The fact that I guess if you're a student, if you're not going to school, you have to learn how to do things differently and so forth. So I like that idea that you can take a number of the learnings that private equity funds are learning and almost apply them on our day-to-day lives, so to say. There's something you mentioned which I found was interesting, that there's a bit more reporting that's required, the models and so forth. And now maybe just talking a bit more about financial models, right? Why are financial models important for your members? I know we've mentioned that, we have a partnership on training and so forth. So when they reach out and they say, we want to be trained, why is this important for them? And for someone who's sort of like, I'm a student maybe, or I'm thinking, should I do a modeling course? Is this critical? Maybe just to try and link that to that person so that they see how it goes ahead.
Okay. I think models are the common language that defines business, the business path, and sort of like the end goal. It's the one language that cuts across markets. If you remember, I mentioned, capital comes from, the other language is money, right? Money, East, West, Center, money is money. To be able to define your businesses to investors, financial models are the ones that bring out the language and define that. So if you're trying to expand to the next level, what is way?
Sorry?
Oh no, I just saw a weird comment coming through. Anyway, so if you're trying to scale to the next level of a business, or if you're trying to define the business plan, basically, financial models are the sort of like the language that is understood and cuts across, any person. I think the word you said, I think the thing you said is a core skill in financial services, because it's a core language in financial services, right? So, and the world moved away from simply analyzing historic information to being able to have the ability to forecast and model possible future outcomes. Now that is the critical thing about modeling, to be able to foresee or to forecast, but with, with proper facts and, numbers, to be able to support your, your assumptions and all of that. So it's an important tool in improving business decision making. So everything from balance sheets and all those things that go into the financial model. You know, basically when I speak to our investors, that is the language that they understand. You know, there's all these things that can be predicted and whatever thrown out there, but numbers are the ones that can be able to communicate what it is that you're trying to achieve. If you look at the private equity industry, financial modeling is applicable in literally, I talked about the investment life cycle. And you can find, and you see financial models are applicable in every stage of the way. So, you know, from financial statements, so forecasting financial statements, you know, analyzing capital budgeting decisions, valuations of firms. Valuations is a big topic. Actually, the past 6 months, I think I've talked about valuations more than anything. So valuations of firms, financial models come in there massively. Comparing operational strategies, financial models come in there as well. Portfolio management, financial models are needed there as well. Risk assessments, you know. So it is the language, and it is literally a tool that is needed to be able to execute anything in our industry.
Oh, thank you. And I hope for the participant, you realize just how critical a skill financial modeling is for the PE space. And maybe then just to get a bit more personal then about you now, what did you study in campus? How is that different from what you're doing today? What was the journey? I mean, from the way you've spoken about portfolio management, financial models, life cycle, I would imagine you did a PhD in private equity.
Yeah, I did a PhD in private equity in my house. No, I'm joking. So I have my undergrad is in mechanical engineering, and that's a story on its own. But the one thing I did know was that I was not going to. So what would happen is, and what I saw, majority of the my classmates would leave school and join big firms. Think about it, KQ, EABL, Safaricom, and that has never been of interest to me. Never been my goal. I have always wanted to be a part of something where I have you know, autonomy over, and you know, so I left university. I worked for a small firm first, but then I launched a business and failed, and they launched another business. And that did well, but I had to leave the business. So I have always been involved in the entrepreneurship space. I moved onto the capital side of things when I realized the challenges that were there. So I said, one, I'm going to learn, and two, I'll fix the gaps there. So that's the journey I'm on right now.
You know, I mean, if I was listening to you, I mean, I did law also, right? And I'm in finance today. But if I was listening to you from sort of like, you know, engineering, now sort of like running the private equity and venture capitalization in East Africa, I would be like, was that journey difficult? I mean, how did you sort of like, is this something you had planned that, you know what, I'll go for, you know, this private equity space? I mean, how was it making the decisions, you know, because I guess this is uncertainty that if you've done engineering, everybody expects you that, you know, the next day you're going to go registered as an engineer, you'll be working on an engineering role and convincing even your parents, right, to do something like this. Just like, no, we took you to do engineering for a reason, not so that you can go and do some other funny thing. So how was that journey for you? And what advice do you have for someone who's sort of like going through this thing where they're just like, I was thrown in this aspect, but I don't want to do it, and I want to be like Esther, I want to be in a very different place.
So first of all, I think the fact that I think doing engineering is what led me to this path, because I think the original goal was to build a business in renewable energy. So the business I mentioned initially, the very first one that I tried to launch was in renewable energy. But I knew nothing. If there's anything that I've learned in the past 20 years is that, or the past, what was I in campus, 2004, um, that period to now is that I have a problem with the education system in Kenya, right? So we learned everything to do with engineering, but we had no business skills whatsoever. So I had this big vision in my head, but I had zero skills. I had no business acumen. I knew what I wanted to do, I just didn't know how to get to it. So I struggled a lot. I was able to bring in partners, even all the way from the Netherlands. And and the partnership bit was not hard because I'd learned this through my time in ISEC. So I was a leader in ISEC at the University of Nairobi. So, creating partnerships and doing you sort of like marketing proposals and things like that I could do easily because of my time in ISEC. But there's certain things around sort of like, building and running a business that now I can admit that I was clearly off the path on that. But it's because of that. That's one of the things I really struggled with both businesses was the funding aspect of it. So how can I get capital into this business? Understanding the spectrum of capital, everything from grant funding, to all the way to private equity. I did not have a proper understanding or even awareness of it at all. So I wasn't able to. So the problem was not me or the business model. It was, and then what? And then how did you get there? So I think I was always on the path. Obviously I struggled. I had a father. My father is an engineer. So he's like, what do you mean? So your business hasn't worked out? Really? Okay, I'm lucky that he was able to let me do whatever the hell I wanted to do for the first few years. But he's like, he also said, tried to start a business engineering, it failed. But that's because he's very traditional. So he's like, I was there as well, did that, failed. Now come, I can help you get any job you want in Kenya because this is my field, But no, I said, I pushed back, and then you can imagine the second business failing again. It was not easy.
Almost like I told you so. Now you need to get that job I've been telling you about.
It wasn't easy, but I think I've been really blessed to just have opportunities come up that are still guiding me. Because maybe I should have mentioned my end-term goal. My end-term goal is to have to run a local capital facility that will fund 1, women, and 2, hardware-based enterprises. So people who are trying to build businesses, like such as the one I was trying to build originally. And not only just give them capital, but give them the resources that they need to take them to the next level. The capacity building and all of that, just to take them to the next. So, a merger between what is currently known as Gearbox. We didn't have Gearbox back in the day, but Dr. Gashigi was my lecturer in university, so I really stand by the work that he does. But also just that, but also the capital facility. Think about it like a Y Combinator of sorts for hardware-based enterprises in East Africa. That's my goal. So I feel like I'm still on the path. It's just that it went on a different detour.
Wow, thank you. That's very inspirational. I would imagine if I was listening to you then, I would be like, I guess it's true that if you're really determined, you can be what you want to be, right? And you can solve some serious problems. And I really hope that you're able to form the organization or the accelerator, incubator kind of organizations where there's hardware, there's women, because that would also help to move, the ecosystem ahead. Those are the key things which are missing in our entrepreneurship ecosystem. Now, I'm going to ask you to give us advice. I'm going to, my next question is just going to be simple. There's a lot of advice that is thrown out there, for someone who's sort of like looking to either start their career or, trying to figure something out, at the beginning. And I guess there's a lot of bad advice that is shared out there. So I'm going to ask you to debunk one of the advice that you hear from people. Usually, please never listen to that. If anything, listen to this other thing.
I think the one that we hear a lot is stick it out. Like, stick it out. Like, this is the thing that you've whatever commit to, like, stick it out for as long as possible until something comes from it, which I think is the career advice that my parents got. And I talk to my mom now and she's like, I wish I was more brave to venture out of the path that she took, because, and then it's learning the triggers. It's learning to I think there's a need to understand yourself first. I know that every year you grow. What was important to you last year is probably not important to you now. So being able to continuously check in with yourself, audit yourself, where have you grown, and is this path that you're on still serving you the way it needs to be? And are you able to also contribute to it or have you gotten to a point where you're neither learning or neither giving back to this role? I think it's I think it should be stick it out until, or that sentence is not complete.
Yeah.
um, and I think that is very what's the word, subjective, depending on the person. But then don't die on this one thing for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I think my mom's example is she learned midway through her career that she had original intention was to be a lawyer, but then realized that the path that she was taking had more money. But then 10 years into the path that she took, she realized that yes, it made money, but her passion, her heart was not in it, and should have had more love or more energy or more enthusiasm if she had taken the legal path. I don't know why, but that is where her passion was.
So did she eventually convert into law, or she stuck it out?
That's why till today. That's Let me tell you. You see that I told you my dad's an engineer.
Mhm.
The only reason I'm not dead right now, it's my mom lives vicariously through me. She, like, let her do what she has chosen to do.
Mm.
Yeah, because she wasn't able to do that for herself.
Mm. That's really good advice. Yeah, that's really good advice. That we shouldn't just keep, hitting against the wall until the wall breaks. Sometimes you should just open the door and walk outside, right? Thank you for that. Incidentally, if you have any questions, kindly put them on the chat. I'll take one or two questions and then we'll close. It's 16:50. We started a bit late. But last question from me, then we'll see whether there's any questions that come from the participants. If you're exiled in an island, you had to take only one book. What book would that be, and why?
I'm sorry. There's no way I'm going to go to an island with one book.
Only one. If you add an extra book, the ship capsizes and everybody dies.
I'm sorry. No, it's no. That's impossible. I'm sorry. Absolutely no way. I would have to take a. There's different genres. There's different. No, there's no way. So I'll tell you books that I've read that have had impact on me. There's a book when I was in first year at the University of Nairobi. The ISEC University of Nairobi group members at the time, we were gifted a book by an author called Pete Ondeng. It was called Africa's Moment. He had just released it or something. He just published it, and I think I don't even remember who it was or why we were given copies. I did not buy that. Actually, that's the one book I recommend that I did not buy by myself. That book was really, really impactful. He talked about Africa's pressing problems at the time, still at this time, and sort of like the summary, sort of like the the push behind it is that these problems will be solved at a personal level. When we bring them down to a personal level, as opposed to always pointing fingers, is when we'll be able to start, moving the needle with regards to the challenges, societal, economic, whatever it is, challenges that we have in Africa. Until today, I find myself thinking back to that book that I read more than 10 years ago. Then I am a huge fan of books on business. Like, I read them as fun literature. So particularly business books written by those who founded businesses before. So, what's his name? Nike guy, Phil Knight's book, Shoe Dog. I can see I have some of them here. Robert Iger's Ride of a Lifetime.
We need to zoom into your.
Uh,
But anyway, go ahead.
Also, your volume has dropped, by the way. What's his name? Steve Jobs' book as well. That was written by Walter Isaacson. Um, I'm forgetting even Damon Dash's book as well. Power of Broke as well. Like, any book that talks about their journey, it's interesting because we focus so much on the numbers and forget about the personal story of resilience and grit and big dreams, and how do you take a big dream and actualize it. So, those books for me, I'd have to go with a bunch of those, and dream with them on the island.
And your ship has capsized, but you've enjoyed the books.
All right, we went down with the books.
Thank you very much. There's just two questions that I'll just ask, which are, whether can you hear me well now? It's still fading.
No, yeah.
Lovely. And now, can you hear me better? Esther, can you hear?
Just go on, just go on. It's faint, but I can.
Ooh la la, I don't know what happened there. But I guess my next, the two key questions which have been asked is, the first one is, at what point does EAVCA fund startups or advise startups, i.e. early stage companies? I think that's from William. I'll let you take that, though I know you don't finance businesses directly, but I'll let you take that. And then the second one is, why hardware capital? Why is hardware and capital part of your goal? I mean, what inspired those two, items to mesh together and to become part of your great ambition?
Okay. So to William's question, and Stephen has alluded to it, EAVCA does not fund businesses. However, we are an association of funds, right? So at all stages, from early stage funds all the way to actually all the way to fund of funds, to institutional investors, and even pension funds. So it's a full spectrum of capital, all the way from those who do $50,000, $100,000 deals to those who do 50 million, $100 million deals. And so it's it's a mixture. It's a pot of all sorts of capital providers who are active in East Africa. We also do not, so basically what you need to understand is our offering and our work is directed at funds and fund managers. And then startups, we also don't advise startups. We have advisors within the network. InVhestia, from InVhestia to Cross Boundary, Dalberg, all the way to KPMG, Deloitte, and the rest. Those are also part of the network. So what we do is, one, we mobilize our network to work with the startups and, at whatever stage. But then I've always had open doors. If you need me to, look at what is it that you need. Are you looking for capital? I'll quickly look at your deck and be able to tell you, well, you're an early stage business in the tech sector looking for $500,000. This is the kind of investor, they're the investors you should talk to. So I'll be able to direct you to the right, because that's one of the things that we find that the lack of awareness that there are private capital providers in the market, but also who do you talk to as well? How do you sort of narrow down to the right investor? And I'm happy to support businesses that way, or even just look at the models and go like, well, talk to Stephen on this, but I'm sure he'll tell you to work on this as well. So we try to help where we can on an unofficial basis. Second question was on why hardware capital. I said my background is in hardware, so this is a personal passion of mine. And if you know the three main challenges for businesses in East Africa: access to capital, access to talent, and access to, wow, have I just forgotten the third one? But access to capital comes high on the list. So my goal is to knock off the access to capital, and in a sector that actually quite a number of investors, this is one of the things I didn't mention actually, is businesses in hardware and manufacturing, early stage manufacturing is so risky that it's not enticing to investors. So they've been overlooked for a long period of time. If you think about it, if you compare, let's say, software to hardware, someone who comes up, with an idea that can be, a software tool or whatever can be built and tested and run within, a couple of weeks. In the hardware space, from concept to prototype to, by the time you have a product, that timeline is already and given our resources and the things that we have in this market, it can take up to even a year or even longer. Proof of concept takes, I don't know how long, So it's not an enticing industry. And for that reason, that's why I want to be in that space.
I'm hoping that now I'm loud enough. Thank you. Thank you very much, Esther. Those are really good ideas that you shared with all of us. I think for me, the key takeout here is it doesn't matter where you start. If you're really looking to, change the world in a certain aspect, all you have to do is keep following your heart and sort of like start from one space, move to the next space and to the next space. Who would have thought, engineering student in UON would be the executive director of the EAVCA a couple of years later. So thank you very much. Just in closing, I'm just going to a few takeaways just in closing. The first one is the speaker series continues. Next week, we're going to be having Saranga Mao, who's a private equity practitioner, managing director of Credev. It's a family, it's a fund that invests in different businesses. It's funded by a family business out of France. So please do register for that. And that's going to be also a very exciting talk. And then please make sure that you also register for the financial modeling competition. You'll be able to get access to the free content and to be able to prepare for the competition itself. And hopefully through Esther, you'll be able to get an internship in one of the private equity companies. So thank you very much. We're going to finish at that point. Thank you, Esther. I've seen you've access to capital, access to talent, access to markets. I think the books that Esther mentioned, just in case you are not there at that point, I think there was Pete Ondeng, Africa's Moment. There was Power of Broke. I don't know who the author there is. And then there was Phil Knight, Shoe Dog, and several others that you mentioned. Thank you very much for those recommendations, Esther. So we finish at that point. Asanteni sana. Bye-bye, Esther, and thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.